Welcome on into the Wolverine TV. I'm Clayton Sayfie with Chris Balas and Austin Fox. We're from the Wolverine.com, and we are presented by Lewis Jewelers, our great sponsor. Fellas, the promo code Blue60 at the Wolverine.com gets you 2 months of our premium content for free. There's been a lot of breaking news, a lot of scoops that have been happening over the last, I'd say, 48 hours, but we'll start with the good. Then we'll get into the some of the other football news. Xavier Worthy asked out of his letter of intent. Matt Dudek is moving on. Looks like they're going to bring in a new director of recruiting. And then the spring game was only 6 days ago. We're recording this on Friday, so we can talk about some of what came out of that. But let's start with Eli Brooks. Was trending this way for a little while, and I think it's just massive. You can't understate just how big it is to have a guy like this back. He's going to bring back leadership. He's going to bring back stellar play on both ends. He's a big shot maker. There's really nothing bad about this decision for Michigan to get Eli Brooks back. And if you had to get one of these guys back between him, Sean D. Brown, Mike Smith, and Austin Davis, the four that were really realistic, I said Eli Brooks, and I think Juwan Howard's pretty happy with how it turned out.
You can't overstate it either, Clay. So
is that the term? Okay, yeah. What did I say?
I've made that mistake. That the interesting thing is, if you could pick one guy, right, like you said, and you'd love to have Isaiah Livers back, and you look at Franz Wagner. That's not realistic. Probably it's going to be a lottery pick. It is interesting to me, that he's finishing up his degree, which is great. That's something that John Beilein started with the culture that Juwan Howard has continued. You remember when Juwan Howard went back and got his degree before you guys were born, probably. But how important it was to him and how important it was to his grandma. And these kids are listening to their coaches. So he's not going to do anything or make any announcements, and neither is Hunter Dickinson, who we believe strongly, almost 100% is coming back until they're done with their classwork. So, but you look at all these guys and you think, who's the one guy where, hey, if this guy can come in and bridge the gap between the present and the future, the past and the future, and be the present, it's Eli Brooks. He was, according to Phil Martelli, the most valuable player on this team at one point this year. We saw it when he was out against Minnesota. We saw it when he was out against Michigan State. That was really the only reason that Michigan State probably won that game, was Eli Brooks went down in the first 5 minutes, and he's valuable on both ends of the floor. He's become a cooler for other teams' runs. He is the guy that makes the big shots and is not afraid to take the big shot. We put up an article yesterday with comments from his dad. Read it on the Wolverine.com, where he was kind of talking about how he's really blossomed into that role where he feels really comfortable in it. Juwan Howard has brought that out of him a lot in the last couple of years, in letting him play through his mistakes as well. We saw him, of course, improve under John Beilein as well. But what a coup, really. Now, in my opinion, you don't really have to go and get another guard from the portal. You ride with Brooks, you ride with Frankie Collins, Zeb Jackson, and see what these guys can do. But just a huge announcement for Michigan basketball.
Yeah, it really is. And it's not only big from an on-court standpoint next year, but also the veteran presence that he'll provide on this team to the younger guys as well. You look at some of the younger guys that Michigan will have on their roster next year: the Jackson, Frankie Collins, Kobe Buffkin. Michigan's going to be very young at that guard spot, and it'll be crucial having a veteran presence like Eli Brooks to help bring those guys along. You talked about some of his stats from last year, but I think he does so many things that don't show up in the box score. Obviously, we know what kind of defensive presence he is on that end. He was also second on the team in assists this past year behind Mike Smith. He finished as a pretty good three-point shooter, I believe 39% on the year. He just does all the little things right, gets guys lined up and in the right places on offense. So I wouldn't be surprised if he runs a little bit of point next year as well for this team. Absolutely huge for Juwan Howard to get him back, like you said. And I think his return raises Michigan's overall ceiling next year. They'll, without a doubt, be Big Ten title contenders once again, in my opinion. And I don't think being national title contenders is out of the question either.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on how some of the freshmen develop, but it's a hell of a start to have Eli back. So then, Chris, Austin and I talked about this yesterday, but as far as a starting lineup, would you say right now, and obviously things change because we even saw that throughout the summer last year, once the guys got on campus, you start to hear how they're doing and whatever, and then when actual practices start, it can be even different. And then when the lights come on, as John Beeline would say, or as the popcorn starts popping, as Phil Martelli would say, it can be even different from that. Would you say right now that you think Frankie Collins is going to start at that point guard spot, and then Eli Brooks would be at the 2? But it is nice, I will say, too, with having Eli that, like Austin, you mentioned it, he can play the point, too. So if you do need that, and maybe that's just early in the year until Frankie Collins gets acclimated a little more, you can do that. So you have flexibility there with Eli as well.
I got a feeling about Frankie Collins, man. The way he breaks guys down, the swagger he plays with. He doesn't shoot the ball extremely well, but the defense, he'll get in your grill. And Juwan Howard loves that. This is going to be a really good defensive team, in my opinion. If you look at, you've got 3 guys coming back that started in about the last 8 games of the year, or 7 games of the year, whatever it was, or 5, whatever it was. But you've got Hunter Dickinson, you've got Brandon Johns, you've got Eli Brooks, and then you've got 2 pieces to fill. I think Collins can certainly be one of them. Is he going to be Mike Smith right away? He's going to be completely different. And that's the thing. You're going to have to adjust your offense a little bit, and that's where coaching comes into play. And then Caleb Houston, I think, is going to be your other guy, assuming Franz Wagner doesn't come back, right? So Caleb Houston will be that other guy. We've heard rumblings that he wants to be a one and done. Does he have that talent? When you watch that Monteverdi team that he played for, man, he was really a lot of times standing in the corner and watching guys do their thing, and I know he's more than that, but he was really the designated shooter on that team during the tournament when they won the national championship, and he's a sniper. He can really shoot it, but you need some shooters on the floor. If, for example, obviously you don't have a stretch 5, right? Brandon Johns hasn't proven to be a stretch 4, and if Frankie Collins can't shoot it, then you better have somebody else out there who can. So to me, that's your lineup at some point. Will Moussa Diabate come on so strong that he supplants Brandon Johns at the 4? We'll see. But I think Johns is going to take it personal. Hey, I've got a freshman here. I would love to see him meet his potential as a shooter, because I think this guy can really shoot the ball. It's all up here, and needs to get it together. But that's where I'm leaning right now.
Yeah, you look at a potential starting 5 of Collins, Brooks, Houston, Johns, and Dickinson if it plays out that way, and it's hard not to call Michigan one of the better teams in the country. Jeff Goodman, the basketball analyst for Stadium, tweeted out a stat the other day. He said that every power conference team in the country has at least one guy in the transfer portal, with the exception of 3 teams, and Michigan was one of those 3. So with Brooks coming back, there's some continuity on this team. You've got guys like Johns and Dickinson and Brooks who will have a decent amount of experience next year. It's so hard to predict what you're going to get from your freshmen. You mentioned now Caleb Houston's an elite shooter, but can he do the other things at a high level? We won't know that until he actually gets on campus. You just simply don't know what you're going to get out of Frankie Collins from that point guard spot. We'll see if he can win that job. I feel like Terence Williams is a little bit of a forgotten man in some ways. I won't be surprised if he at least has a role on next year's team as a sophomore, but just looking up and down the lineup, Juwan Howard is going to have a fairly deep team, and I think it's going to be crucial to have that depth and, again, that experience in guys like Dickinson and Brooks and Brandon Johns. So I'm excited about this group. I think they're bound to take at least a small step back from this past season, but that's really not saying much when reflecting on how good they were last year.
I'm glad you brought up Terence Williams, because I love the way that he and Dickinson play together, and you can tell that they were teammates before. The entry passes, he is unbelievable at that. He knows where Hunter is, where he likes the ball. He gets it to him. It's going to be on Dickinson, really. If I were him, if I were Juwan Howard, I'd say, okay, I need you to do 1,000 right-handed little jump hooks in the lane from all spots heading into next year, and to shoot that free throw line jumper, from the post there, the high post jump shot. He can make that with regularity. We've spoken to coaches across the country that said that needs to be part of his arsenal. If you watch how he shoots free throws, you can tell that he's got a great touch. I'm not asking him to be out there gunning 23-footers yet, that, and in time he's going to have to probably do some of that if he wants to play in the NBA, but you can do some high pick and roll stuff, and he can have a Mitch McGary type impact with that jump shot. In my opinion, I think he is that good.
I mean, he can shoot the 3. Yeah, I would start with certainly developing a right hand, because that became a weakness, I think, as the season went on. Teams knew how to shade him, that he wanted to go over that right shoulder. But I think eventually he's going to have a shot. And, he's got some work to do before he's an NBA-type player. But, he's certainly a Big Ten Player of the Year contender next year. And that's something to build around. You kind of mentioned the shooting earlier. There is not really a shooter on this team now that Isaiah Livers is gone. and other than Caleb Houston, I guess, but no one really coming back. Eli Brooks can shoot and is a good shooter, but I wouldn't consider him just like, a guy who's an elite shooter. He's been streaky throughout his career, and that's not, taking anything away from Eli. But so that'll be interesting. They'll play a lot inside out. Hopefully they do work on some of those entry passes that you're mentioning. Maybe get Terence Williams in and just let him, either feed it in or swing the ball, because, sometimes they got stuck on that. But I think they are going to adjust this offense quite a bit this offseason. You're going to have to, after Mike Smith and Xavier Simpson, and then playing through Franz Wagner as well towards the end of this season, especially when Livers went down. So it'll be interesting to see what this team will look like. Anything else on hoops?
Yeah, and I want to say that you'd love to see. I love the inside-out concept, especially when you have a guy like Dickinson. But don't force it. Don't bring the offense to a standstill to do it with him or Brandon Johns. And I like the idea of tempo and getting down there and getting guys in position immediately before defenses have time to set. And I think that's the way Juwan Howard wants to play anyways, wants to play a little bit faster. So, but to me, it drives me crazy when you watch them, you're telegraphing your passes. They probably had, 2 turnovers a game when they were telegraphing entry passes down the stretch, because the offense would come to a standstill and it was ugly at times. So, but that's why these coaches make the big bucks, right? And to me, it's going to have to, like I said, it's going to have to look different. I think Brooks is a better shooter than we give him credit for sometimes. But you're right, he is streaky. But you know what? I think his percentage was higher than Duncan Robinson's last year, if I'm not mistaken. So he's going to have an opportunity here, and he's going to have that green light and that confidence. I think you're going to see 40+% from him next year.
One last thing on Eli Brooks. I love the dedication and the loyalty that he's shown to Michigan by taking advantage of this NCAA rule and coming back again in this day and age of college sports where guys can't wait to get out of their respective schools. I think it's awesome that Eli Brooks is coming back again. He has a lot of loyalty to that Michigan uniform and obviously takes a lot of pride in wearing it. And I wish that's something other players around the country at their respective schools would do. So shout out to Eli Brooks. I think he's overcome a lot of adversity here, more than people realize. So it's going to be an honor watching him again next year in Ann Arbor. And again, I'm so thankful, and I think Juwan Howard is as well, to have him back in a Michigan uniform for one more season.
I'm waiting for that "the Muffin" tattoo on his right arm, man. That's
yeah,
his dad called him the Muffin on Senior Day. I don't think they planned on anybody seeing that, and it got out there because he rises up, not because of the hair or anything else. There you go.
Yeah, no, I thought that was great. I thought your story was great. Everyone should check that out at thewolverine.com. Man, yeah, a special kid. And I thought, Austin, you were about to cry there for a second when you were talking there about Eli, but I don't blame you. I mean, it's huge to have him back. And it does say quite a bit about the program, as you were kind of alluding to. Not that, last season Michigan had 3 guys leave, right? And that doesn't mean like Juwan Howard, the transition's not going well. And, if they have a guy surprise and transfer here in the next month, that doesn't mean that, something bad is going on. But to be one of those 3 programs without a transfer says a lot about the program. And then you kind of look at the football side of things and how there's 14 guys that have transferred since the end of last season. That includes Xavier Worthy, who we're going to talk about in just a second. So I think it's all good right now with Michigan basketball and the way that they were able to not only keep Eli Brooks back, a guy who wants to be here for another season that's been through a lot, keep the other guys. We mentioned Brandon Johns about a month ago, how, there's a chance that maybe he would look around. And there's good players that were contributors around the country on good teams that have left. So it's no small thing, I think, that these guys are sticking around.
Yeah, without a doubt. And David Julius, I thought, made a bad decision. You can't really fault Colin Castleton. He got more of an opportunity down there at Florida and played extremely well. You wonder, with his minutes, Austin Davis too, maybe that would have been enough to push him over the top. Who knows? We can speculate on it. But in Cole Badgemo, we'll see what happens with him at Washington. He's got a long way to go. But I thought DeJulius made a terrible decision. And, and we've kind of seen, what he missed out on flat out, so. But it works. Things generally work out like they're supposed to when you've got great culture, and that's what they've got with Michigan basketball right now.
Yeah, DeJulius had an odd season at Cincinnati. He actually opted out late in their season as well, just to opt back in a few weeks later. So that was just an all-around odd situation. Castleton worked out pretty darn well at Florida, but Cole Badgemo was really non-existent for Washington this past year. I know some Michigan fans weren't happy when those three announced their transfer and were a little bit worried, but things worked out pretty darn well for Michigan, and they really didn't miss any of those guys. And again, that's a credit to the culture that Juwan Howard has built and a testament to that. So again, like you said, things usually work out pretty darn well, and that's exactly how it went for Michigan this past year without those guys.
Oh, darn it, I agree.
Yeah, and Castleton at Florida, like, I don't blame him based on the minutes that he got. Now, he's actually declared for the draft without an agent, which is hilarious. Like, I wouldn't have thought that a year ago, so good for him. And he dominated in that win over Virginia Tech in the first round of the NCAA tournament, which I was watching. So he's a good player. He would have been a heck of a 1-2 punch with Hunter Dickinson this year. I don't know how the minutes would have played out. I think Hunter still is the better player, but I think you would have seen him maybe a little bit at the 4, and it would have been a kind of a different dynamic, and you would have had to get him on the floor at times. So it would have been interesting. But, yeah, things couldn't have worked out better this past season, I think, for Michigan. For Colin Castleton, David DeJulius, obviously a rocky season, and Cole Badgema probably had as much of an impact at Washington as he would have had at Michigan, so we'll just see with him. But anything else on the basketball side of things before we head over to football here?
Football, let's go.
Let's do it. There we go. Michigan football breakdown. We will start with some of the news before we get into spring ball. Some tough news, I think, for Michigan fans yesterday with this man, Xavier Worthy, asking out of his letter of intent. Kind of happened quickly. It seemed like, Chris, you reported the day before, that things were looking bad once again. I think people were a little optimistic, coming out of, surviving basically the initial blow of him not being able to enroll early. But then here he is now, I guess, a transfer or whatever you want to call it, decommitment. And the drama just seemed to never end with him. And good luck to him going forward, I guess, with the drama that is ahead.
All the crap about, we got to keep it secret. He's in town, but we don't want anybody to know. And, what's he doing and what's next? And, then he gets on social media and he's in these chat groups. And when Giles Jackson left, he wasn't real kind to the Michigan program. Quit babysitting these kids and let them go. You don't need to. These are not the kinds of guys that you're going to. I don't care how talented he is. And yeah, you need talent, but man, you can't sit there and win with guys that don't really want to be here and don't want to be all in. And it was nonstop drama here. And, it rarely works with guys like that. And especially with the portal now, I can't count the number of guys in the portal anymore. It's insane. And it has become a free for all. It is kind of ironic, isn't it, that Jim Harbaugh was the one really advocating for the one and done, you can get a free transfer, without having to sit out a year. And now his program is the one that is absolutely getting raked by other programs, and guys are leaving, and that needs to change. That's number one that needs to change. You need to, and if guys want to go, you let them go. And there's a certain amount of, not butt kissing, I don't want to call it, but a certain amount of recruiting you have to do when they're here. And it goes all the way back. I can go back to Anthony Carter. This is even before my time, but he was on planes and going home. They had to pick him up at airports and stuff like that because he was homesick. But now there's a sense of entitlement that, hey, if something doesn't happen for me in the first 6 weeks on campus, then I need to go, or, you owe me something. And sadly, that's where college football is now. And that's why that, and not having Michigan win a title in 16 years, are parts of the reason why a lot of Michigan fans, football fans, are apathetic right now. Winning changes that. So let me make that clear right now. I actually got an email from somebody saying, why are you so down on the football program all the time? Well, what the football program that I watched when I was younger, when I was your age, was competing for titles. They had great culture. And that is not where we are right now under Jim Harbaugh. And I don't think anybody saw that coming. And that's the disappointing part. But to me, you know what? If guys don't want to be here, you let them go, and you build with guys who do, and you recruit to that. And to me, that's part of the recruiting process too, getting to know the family. When you talk to a kid and you say, hey, what happens, the first time you don't get your way, and then you talk to the parents and you say, is this a kid who's willing to stick it out? Maybe that's old school, and maybe it's unrealistic, but that's where I am right now.
his recruitment was really a drama fest from the get-go, committing to Michigan and then nearly flipping to Alabama just to kind of hold an announcement just to reaffirm his commitment to Michigan. Turns out it really wasn't much of a commitment in the first place. That whole saga with him potentially early enrolling and then not being allowed to really, I think, kind of put the writing on the wall in terms of this eventually happening down the road. Is it a loss from a personnel standpoint on the field? I guess so, just because he's athletic, and a lot of Michigan's receivers, with the exception of Ronnie Bell, really haven't done much in recent years. But again, you don't necessarily win with guys with this kind of attitude. Oftentimes stuff like this can actually be a blessing in disguise. So maybe this will wind up being how that plays out. I know he was highly rated, a highly rated recruit, top 70 kid, one of the better receivers in the country. But again, it reminds me of the Josh Christopher situation in basketball, one of the best players in the country. But sure enough, that was a blessing in disguise. So maybe that's the case with this one as well. You talked about the loyalty to the Michigan program. I think it's obvious he didn't have much, seeing as how quickly he bolted at the first sign of adversity. So I really don't see how this one is much of a loss, despite what the recruiting rankings say about him.
And everybody wants to blame admissions and so on and so forth. Well, they said he was going to be an early enrollee. Well, when they were making these decisions, he was out visiting Alabama and taking pictures on the 50-yard line. And there were other kids that were saying, hey, can I get a spot? You got to make some guarantees to some people. And, there were a lot of guys that were much more firmly committed. In my opinion, yes, you need the top-end talent. You need to do things, and say, okay, yeah, we're going to take care of that. And they made a mistake. I will say that. They made a mistake with numbers. And we won't say who or how, but yeah, that happened. And would he still be here? Maybe. But man, his heart never really seemed in it to me. And again, that's not how you win.
Yeah, and also, Austin, you mentioned his recruitment being kind of a drama fest. He was silently committed to Oregon before he then committed to Michigan, then visited Alabama, held a ceremony to then commit to a school he was already committed to. So, and obviously Michigan seemed to make a mistake in terms of not getting him on campus as an early enrollee, but, he's not an early enrollee at, say, the next school he decides to go to either, so you can't change that. I guess if it just pissed you off enough, then you're gone. So, what a situation. I guess it's behind Michigan. I think that, in a sense, it could be a blessing in disguise. Like, you get the guys that are, running through the doors or whatever to get to Michigan. But also you need talent, and you need a guy like Xavier Worthy. I think he was kind of the guy that we've all been waiting for Josh Gaddis to get in terms of the speed and space. As a football player, who
knows? Maybe it's Andrel Anthony. That's the thing.
Yeah.
We think so, but that's the recruiting, right? It's a crapshoot, and maybe it's Andrel Anthony who played extremely well. How many guys have we heard that have come in here and he's the next so and so, and he's going to be the next great, and then some guy comes out of nowhere and he's better. Ronnie Bell had a better career than Donovan Peoples-Jones or Tariq Black. He might not be the surefire pro, but we were sitting there talking about these all NFL wide receivers. And Ronnie Bell's busting his ass and doing more for the football team than either of those guys. So you don't know, but point taken, Clay. If you can get those guys, and that's what Lloyd Carr was so good at, was getting the elite talent on campus. But really, they still had the love of Michigan, and they understood what they were playing for. And it wasn't just, hey, when are my 2 years up so that I can go and get my paycheck?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that Xavier Worthy was a guarantee by any stretch, but I think if you play the percentages in terms of just a football player, not talking about the drama or whatever, looking at him and watching what he was able to do, I mean, the kid ran a 10.55 100-meter dash as a sophomore, I think, in high school. I think you play the percentages, and more times than not, with the trio of receivers Michigan brought in this season, he's the guy that ends up being the best. Now, it's no guarantee, and I think Andrel Anthony's turning some heads, and obviously, he's probably still a year away from being a major contributor at least. But, I would like a playmaker if I'm Michigan, like Xavier Worthy, in that program. But obviously, it didn't work out. And talking about his personality and all that is kind of besides the point, I guess, that I was trying to make. But let's get to Matt Dudek, his departure real quick before we talk some more spring ball. He's heading to Mississippi State, going from Jim Harbaugh to Mike Leach. Obviously seemed like Michigan's bringing in Courtney Morgan, former offensive lineman under Lloyd Carr there in the early 2000s, played with Ron Bellamy, good friends with Ron Bellamy, has the West Coast ties, has the ties all around the country. But first, just on Dudek, your guys' thoughts. I mean, he brought in some good classes. I think things were decent, but could you improve there? I think absolutely, and I think that people were kind of saying that for a few years. I will say he probably got a little more criticism than he deserved, considering he didn't do everything when it had to do with recruiting. But, so he was kind of a scapegoat there in a way. But at the same time, I think you could have improved there, and I think Michigan probably will with Courtney Morgan coming in.
If they give him some help, too, and that's the thing. They need a bigger recruiting department, and they need to take advantage of that, especially when you're fighting a losing battle of, we know what's going on at other schools. We know what's going on down south. They don't even try to hide it anymore. And I heard a story from a dad the other day whose kid didn't accept anything, and he was at a basketball game, and some guy came up next to him with a southern accent in Massachusetts, and he said, "What's it going to take to get your boy up here?" And he said, and he kind of laughed it off. He goes, "Well, we're going to give him anything he wants," and he was dead serious. So, thankfully, there are still some guys, and I'll go back to the Steve Schillings, who's, again, probably before your time, a 5-star, guys that are looking for the education and the experience and, everything that Michigan has to offer besides that. And there are enough of those guys out there, but the pool is shrinking and it gets smaller and smaller. So you need a bigger recruiting department, number one. Number two, I won't miss his tweets. I didn't think that was, some of the stuff that he put out there and it was all in good fun, I guess, but it was un-Michigan-like in my opinion. And I know I'm going to get a lot of heat for that, oh, you're old, blah, 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 blah. But, I didn't think that was the way to go at times, but I think he worked pretty hard, and there were times that he did some things right. Now, Courtney Morgan, I love the ties to championship teams, and I've said that before. You've got guys now like Mike Hart back in the building as your running backs coach, Ron Bellamy as your safeties coach that get it and understand it. I think Courtney Morgan's that guy as well, and I think he's going to go all in to, and he's got a pretty good reputation. So you're going to see him do some really good things there, but they need to get more and more guys around him and identify talent early and really, really go after it, because let's be honest, it's still the Jimmies and Joes guys that are going to win you the majority of games.
Yeah, I don't mean to downplay this, but I really don't think this will have much of an impact. Michigan's going to continue recruiting at a high level. Michigan signed 3 straight top 11 classes under Dudek from 2019 to 2021, and I think that's what they'll continue to do. I agree with a lot of what you said about Dudek and some of the silliness on Twitter and whatnot. I know a lot of the players loved him. A lot of the families loved him. He kind of had that bubbly, energetic personality. Had a chance to meet him a few times in person. Nice guy, but at the same time, maybe it rubbed some people the wrong way, potentially. Tara McGregor, Braden McGregor's mom, put out a real nice thank you note on Twitter. Matt Dudek's goodbye letter himself was very classy as well. So, yeah, absolutely. We wish him nothing but the best down at Mississippi State, working under Mike Leach, another unique coach, if you will, in the college football industry. I know he brought in a lot of talented guys, Matt Dudek, that is, on paper, but perhaps some of the guys weren't the best fits, and I think we're seeing that, or we have seen that on the field over the past 3 to 4 years while he was here. I think things will be just fine under Courtney Morgan. I'm excited about, some of the future classes that they'll have. But again, Matt Dudek did some good things here. But, yeah, we'll see what he does down at Mississippi State. And we wish him nothing but the best.
Yeah, there's no doubt in Matt Dudek. You can't mention him without mentioning he was college football's first general manager at Arizona, which I think is kind of funny. But, yeah, all the best to Matty D. Spring ball here. Coming out of the spring game, which was closed, but Chris, right after you were able to gather basically what happened, the blue team winning 22-10 and getting the steak over the maize team, which we talked. There was some controversy about that last week. Would it be the white team or it ended up being the color rush, maize versus the blue. Cade McNamara's squad winning. I guess let's start with the offense. It wasn't the ones versus the ones because they drafted 2 different teams, but the offense and what happened there. Andrel Anthony, we talked about him earlier, having a nice day for probably the true freshman of the game, I'd say, based on what came out of it. thoughts generally on what happened offensively.
Yeah, he was given more to work with. Cade McNamara was with a better offensive line, and you like that all blue look, don't you? You want to see that again?
It's pretty good. You don't like it?
Yeah. I'm a traditionalist, man. So don't mess with the home uni, But the road uni, they need to bring back the maize pants and the white shirts, and they probably won't. But anyway, he had the better offensive line, and JJ McCarthy was kind of running for his life half the time. But everybody we've spoken with said you can see the talent in this kid, and he is the future. Cade McNamara is probably the now. Or maybe Alan Bowman, everybody's like, oh, Cade was great, so on and so forth. The people who are really close to it and who have an eye on it said he was okay. He was solid. There were a lot of balls knocked down at the line of scrimmage. There were some balls dropped. McCarthy had one dropped as well. That would have been another touchdown from what we understand. So too many drop passes still, which has been a theme of this, program for the last, probably since, 2016. But Eric All wasn't one of them, and that was exciting. He's a tight end that's going to get targeted quite a bit. He had, I think, somebody estimated about 4 catches for 60-something yards and played extremely well. And that's what you need to see, but you need to see it translate to game day because we've seen way too many drops from him as well. So, but that was exciting. You want to see who the offensive line, how it comes together. And you can't see it in a game like this because you've got guys that haven't really played next to each other a whole lot. So that's going to be the big question mark. But to me, there still aren't enough top shelf playmakers. I think Ronnie Bell is going to probably lead this team in receiving again. He would be, in my opinion, a number 3 receiver on a championship team. A guy that you need to win with, but not the guy that you can target and it's going to get behind defenses. I think Cornelius Johnson will be good. It's solid, but do they have enough pieces? Like you said, they've recruited well on paper, but it's time for these guys to really step up and provide some of the playmakers. I think the running game is going to be the strength of this team. I love Zach Zinter. I think that right side of the line, that's a lot of beef guys with Zinter and Stuber on the right side. And Hassan Haskins proved that he's being overlooked again and was by far the best running back in the spring game and probably in the spring. They love Blake Corum and they love Donovan Edwards, but Hassan Haskins was really an eye-opener on Saturday as well.
He's a gamer, too, like Hassan Haskins. Like, I feel like he's the guy that's not going to look as good in practice. And that's different than a quarterback if you talk about Cade. For a running back, because you can't get the extra yard like when there's no contact and things like that. And, so I think Hassan Haskins is that guy that, and it probably even happened 2 years ago when he was, second or third on the depth charts coming into the year, and then ended up being like the guy you wanted carrying the ball towards the end. So, yeah.
And they even moved him to linebacker at one point, Austin, but I like him.
He started that 2019 season as an absolute afterthought. He was not a part of that rotation whatsoever. And then, like you said, Clay, sure enough, he burst onto the scene. He had that huge game against Notre Dame midway through the year when he ran for 152 yards or whatever it was. And he's, easily the best back on the roster now, at least from what we've seen so far this year. I think the running back room in general is going to be the strength of this Michigan offense this year with Haskins and Corum and Edwards, with one of the main reasons being there's so many question marks at so many other spots on this team. You talked about Eric All a little bit. With Nick Eubanks gone, he's going to have to be the top guy at that tight end spot, but drops have really been the story of his career so far. It was good to hear he had a good spring game and showed good hands and caught the ball, but can that translate over to games? The story's similar with Andrell Anthony. Sure, it was good to see him have a big spring game in what was really his first extensive action outside of a typical closed practice, but can he translate that to games? I wouldn't be surprised to see him contribute a little bit at wide receiver this year, just because I think the door could be open for playing time with Giles Jackson gone and Mike Sainer still not really having done much throughout his career. One of my biggest takeaways from the spring as a whole was the fact that nobody necessarily did grab that quarterback spot and really surge ahead. I didn't necessarily expect Cade McNamara to, but at the same time, it would have been nice to hear that he did that. But by the sounds of it, sounds like he's always kind of been an average practice player, if you will. So, and more of a gamer, like Clay said. But again, the sample size is so small. So a lot of question marks still coming out of spring. But again, I think that's to be expected when considering how poorly last year's team played overall in the field.
But he is the clear number 1. And that's the thing, and they made that clear. I think Matt Weiss said that too.
He called him the starter, and
he
he
did.
said, and he actually said he thinks he's going to play 10 years in the NFL. Now that's just coach speak, but yeah, he said he's a starter. So
10 years. Oh wow,
that's what he said.
I'd love to see it, and let's see it. So
it's not out of the realm of possibility, but yeah, I mean,
no, and I'll be honest, I still think Alan Bowman, there's a shot there. This guy completed 67% of his passes in the games in which he played. From what I saw, what I saw was correct, and threw for 5,600 yards and 33 touchdowns. So the Texas Tech transfer, he'll be here in June, and then it's game on, man. And who knows? Maybe the light goes on for J.J. McCarthy, and he, it's like it was explained to us, and we'll have more on this in a story, that he's got 8 things to think about on different drops, like 3-step drop, 5-step drop, just the little technicalities that he has to learn. That's a lot for a freshman, and it's hard. So he's going to be really, really good, and he's a leader. Everything we've heard about this guy, everybody's like, oh, why can't we get the star? He's going to be really, really good. It's just a matter of time.
Matt Weiss basically said that yesterday, and he said that when he came in, he was like, all right, we got this freshman. He'd heard of him, whatever, obviously, interviewing and things like that. He comes in, he's like, hey, man, all right, when you're getting ready for a game, what's your like mindset like? How do you get ready or whatever? And JJ was like, well, I do this to clear my head, and I listen to this and that, and I do this shoulder exercise, and I loosen up this way. And he was like, whoa. And he said, like, I asked him for a copy of it because, he wanted it himself. So J.J. McCarthy's ahead of his years. It's still tough. My head would be spinning in there, too, trying to read a defense, know what you're supposed to do on offense, move in the pocket and all this, and know what, the plays are. So it's certainly tough. And, yeah, the light could go on for him. And Matt Weiss named Cade the starter now. I don't know if it was like an official like naming him the starter, but he said he's the starter now, out of spring, and that can obviously change. And Alan Bowman, I think that there's reason to think that he can compete. He also is transferring because he got passed up at Texas Tech, which is a program that shouldn't be on this level. So I guess we'll have to see with him, and it's a good option. I'm glad they brought him in for sure. Defense, anything with the defense that stood out to you guys coming out of the spring? I think it's interesting now that you kind of see who's playing where and things like that. And we had the depth chart up via yourself, CB, with some of who's in the 2 deep. I got the picture here of Mike Morris. If you're watching on the YouTube and not listening, I thought he looks pretty good there at that outside linebacker spot. But he's got a lot to prove, and so do the others. Yeah.
Yeah, one of our guys said when he gets off the bus, he looks like Chase Young, and that's maybe a little bit hyperbole, but he's had a great spring. He was one of them. Dax Hill's a freak of nature. Everybody knew he would be at this point in his career, with his athleticism and his instincts. So he's going to be one of your leaders out there. Brad Hawkins had a good spring. He's going to be another one, but the front 7 is the concern. And can they hold up against the run? And as of now, it doesn't look like it. Mozzie Smith needs to get his conditioning down to the point where he can play so many snaps in the middle, especially if they're going to a 3-4 base. Now they're going to be multiple, but that position is so important, and they're going to need him on the field. Chris Hinton needs to play like the 5-star that he was and hold his ground. Guys have to do a better job holding the edge. You saw Wisconsin just brutalize them last year. It was embarrassing, frankly. And Donovan Jeter can't be on roller skates like he was half the time last year. It's time for these guys to play like to their rankings and to really provide some stuff up front that we haven't seen yet. And I don't know that they have that ability. It worries you a little bit with Michael Barrett at middle linebacker, moves from Viper, not very big. He's going to have to be a lot more physical, and that line's going to have to protect him a little bit better. So to me, that is the huge question mark. That and the depth, defensive tackle depth is anemic. With all due respect to the backups, a couple of former walk-ons in there, and the linebacker depth consists of freshmen. So really, it's a young team. You hope that they grow throughout the year, but my expectations are pretty low for this group. And then we can talk about the corners too. I thought they were below average last year for a good majority of the time. In a really good defense with a great front 7, you can get away with being average at cornerback if you want to win big games on your schedule. These guys are going to have a tough time with that, in my opinion.
I think one of the main things that Michigan needs to shore up on defense is to find pass rushers, because I know Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson got hurt last year, but even still, their pass rush was non-existent way too often. They finished 119th in the country out of 127 teams who played FBS football last year in tackles for loss per game. So obviously they were one of the worst teams in the country in that regard. Hutchinson, obviously, you have him back. We're calling him for what's going to be his junior year, I guess, his fourth year on campus, though. But they need guys behind him to step up. And honestly, I don't know who that's going to be. Taylor Upshaw is probably the most experienced player in that reaper spot, quote unquote, that Mike McDonald's implementing in his defense. But there's a lot of youngsters who haven't seen the field much, who I think need to step up and provide a pass rush, whether that's a David Ojabo or Jalen Harrell or Mike Morris, like you guys talked about. There's plenty of candidates, but it's about time that someone steps up and do it. I think the narrative is kind of similar at corner. Vince Gray and Jamon Green are the two most experienced guys back as redshirt sophomores, but obviously they need to elevate their game, or someone else needs to go in for them. I think it was Jamon Green singled out DJ Turner as a corner who's really caught people's eyes in the secondary this year, but he's never really seen the field. He's in his third year in the program now, and by the time you enter your third year, I think it's time that you really start contributing at a high level. So there's still a lot of question marks on this defense. Obviously, it wasn't good last year, finished 84th in the country. So we'll see how these changes that Mike McDonald and Mo Linguist are making to this group, we'll see how they pan out. But my expectations as a whole for this defense are very low as well heading into next fall.
And let's be clear, they didn't. It's not called the Reaper position. It was just Upshaw said, I call us the Reapers. Kind of like, you call the wide receivers the crew or something like that. So Austin Fox is just throwing crap out there. He doesn't know what he's talking about there. So, anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought with that group, with the Reaper group, I'll just call it that now that we're doing that.
Yeah, there you go. Great.
I thought it was ridiculous that they weren't able to at least, this is easier said than done, but do something to scheme one of those guys open. I know Aiden Hutchinson was, facing double teams. Well, you can do something with your defensive tackle, or, I'm no, coach, but, to get one of these guys in one-on-one situation with a tackle or something on some down. They didn't sack Michigan State. What did they go 3-4 straight games without a sack? It's unacceptable. Yeah. I know there were injuries. So I'm optimistic that in a league that Mike McDonald and these guys are coming from, where you live and die on being able to pressure an opposing quarterback, I'm optimistic that they're going to be better in that regard than Don Brown, who wanted to overpower you with better talent. When he didn't have it, it didn't work. But at the same time, I'm not optimistic, like you guys have mentioned, about the depth, about what's there. Taylor Upshaw as your second, kind of outside guy, has played in, probably less than 100 meaningful snaps, and it's just not enough, I'd say, to be confident about that group.
Yeah, and I was going to say Kwity Paye won, I think, 25.7% of his one-on-ones last year, but there were times that, they'd get the ball out quickly because of the scheme, and know where to go with the ball. You saw what Michigan State did against Michigan, which was still one of the most ridiculous things I've ever seen in Michigan Stadium against that crappy team. And then you saw how Iowa defended them the following week, and Michigan State couldn't do a damn thing. And you're going to see more defense like that. You're going to see a lot more zone quarters. You're going to see just about everything. So, and I think that's going to help the corners, but they need that help, guys, because, Jalen Perry and DJ Turner, I think, are going to be solid and be pretty good. But right now they're still backups to a pair of guys that still have a lot to prove.
Yeah, I know we focus on the negatives, but one positive in terms of the starters, at least, with very few question marks surrounding it, I think that's safety, with Dax Hill back for his sophomore year, and then Brad Hawkins taking advantage of that fifth root year that the NCAA has given out. So that was really good to see. Maybe some questions in the two deep behind those guys. I know RJ Moten was listed as a guy recently in the two deep, freshman who's never seen the field, but assuming Hawkins and Hill stay healthy at safety, you have to be at least a little optimistic with the safety spot, and that's one of the few spots that at least doesn't have many question marks surrounding its starters on defense.
I like that. RJ Moten, center fielder, baseball type guy. So we'll see.
Backup center fielder.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. He's not. I was looking forward to him to possibly playing baseball for Eric Bakich, but as he was kind of originally planning on coming in. But yeah, that's the defense. Anything else on spring ball now? And we're fully in off-season mode, both basketball and football once again, heading into what'll be, summer and then everything after that.
Working on football preview stuff now, guys, and let's get after it.
Sounds good. All right. Promo code Blue60 at thewolverine.com if you want all of our coverage. And we'll see everyone next week.